Hopeful holidays and the story of two men who prove there is always hope for forgiveness and redemption. One was a cop, the other his target. And what they learn from each other is a lesson for us all. Watch this.
I was probably over here by the vehicle when you came out over there.
At this convenience store, Andrew and Jamel's lives collided in a way that would forever change them both. Andrew, a narcotics officer with the Benton Harbor Police Department, got a tip to bust a drug dealer here. And Jamel was at the wrong place, wrong time.
He comes out of the store and starts walking right towards the vehicle. I wasn't in uniform, I was plain clothes. And I said, "Give me the dope. I know you brought me some dope."
And I'm like, "What dope? I don't have any dope." And I'm trying to walk around him, and it just wasn't working.
I put handcuffs on him and I detained him in the back of one of the squad cars after searching him, and then went back to the vehicle and found an ounce of crack cocaine in the center console of the vehicle.
Jamel was angry and agitated because he was on his way to meet his baby son for the very first time. And the drugs weren't his. Andrew arrested the wrong man.
I got a phone call from the FBI saying that it wasn't the guy who I thought it was, that his fingerprints came back, that it was somebody else.
Andrew had a choice: let an innocent man go free or lie about it. He decided to lie, writing a police report that blamed Jamel McGee.
It's the power of a police officer. One man's word can wreck an entire man's life.
I was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison.
One of my main goals was to be the absolute top cop, not only in my county, but in the state. And I was willing to lie in any report if that were going to advance my career.
While Jamel was in prison, Andrew's career came to a stunning end. In 2008, he was busted for drug possession and served 18 months in federal prison. Jamel was finally released after serving 3 years in jail.
It's froze if it is.
In 2011, their paths crossed again at this park. It happened to be the first day that Jamel met his son.
I beeline right to him, and I stuck out my hand.
He said, "Do you remember my name?" And I said, "Jamel McGee."
I just looked down at my son, and I said, "Well, explain to my son I was missing these years out of his life."
And I said, "Man, there's nothing I can do to give you that time back. I was a messed up human being. You know, I was addicted to myself. I was addicted to my ego. I'm so sorry for the things I did to you."
Jamel took his son and walked away. But in the following years, the unthinkable happened between the two men. When we come back, what happened next between Andrew and Jamel would change the two men forever. And it might just help you, too. Before the break, we heard some of the story of Andrew Collins and Jamel McGee, who had every reason to consider themselves mortal enemies. Andrew had, after all, sent Jamel to prison unfairly. But their story does not end there. And the book they wrote together is Convicted: A Crooked Cop, an Innocent Man, and an Unlikely Journey of Forgiveness and Friendship. Andrew Collins and Jamel McGee are here with me now. It's unbelievable. It's incredible. Thank you both so much for telling this story. Andrew, let me start with you and ask you the question everybody's thinking, which is, how could you?
Yeah. On that day, I was convinced that Jamel was guilty. When he came out of the store, he looked like a drug dealer. And I just look back now and I say, Jamel, who is now my friend, wasn't dressed much different than he is today. But on that day, I was convinced that this man was guilty. So I operated the rest of the day out of that guilty until proven innocent. So I just, I set it in my mind that by the end of this day, I was going to get a conviction.
But then you get the call from the FBI saying you got the wrong guy.
Yeah, well, the call wasn't I got the wrong guy. The call was the guy, I locked Jamel up under the wrong name because he was so frustrated that day he wouldn't give me his name. And once his fingerprints came back, it was clear that it wasn't the guy who I was targeting. So at that point, I could have cleared everything up, but I was still convinced in my mind that he was guilty and that he needed to go down for it.
So in your head, you didn't think you were sending an innocent man to prison?
No, it wasn't until we got talking after we became friends that I really had to reconcile in myself that this was a completely innocent man.
How about you, Jamel? I mean, you're sitting there knowing the drugs were not yours, that this was completely unfair. Did you feel powerless to stop it?
Oh, totally. There was nothing I can do to stop it. Everything I tried to say or produce, nobody wanted to listen or even hear of it.
Was it a jury trial? How did you wind
Yes, I
up
had a
jury
jury
trial?
trial.
So the jury did not believe your testimonial?
Not at all. Not at all. I guess not, because when they went in for deliberation, well, they didn't even go back for deliberation. The last juror was at the door, and the judge said something to the juror, and they all came back.
And when you're standing there in court and they say you're going to prison for 10 years,
Yeah.
what goes through your head?
Angry, frustrated. I just wanted to, I was hurt, and I wanted to just make somebody pay for this.
And then it's like a miracle because 3 years in, you find out the cop who's responsible for you being there was himself arrested. And the case against you fell apart. You get released. There's this meeting by chance in this park in Michigan one day.
Yeah.
Did you recognize him immediately?
Oh, yeah.
Did you remember him?
I did. As he was coming through the crowd, there's hundreds of people out there, and I see him coming at me, and I turned to a friend of mine, and I said, hey, if this goes sideways, take my daughter home.
There's a very good chance this could go sideways.
Right. He didn't look happy. And, he reached out his hand to shake my hand, and I was thinking, oh, great, this is a reconciliation moment. This is what I feel like I'm called to. So I shook his hand, and he squeezed it extremely tightly, and I was it was pretty apparent that day that it wasn't going to go the way I thought.
Where were you mentally at this point? Because you sort of were honest about being this brash cop who didn't care about.
Yeah. So by this point, when we met in the park, I went through this incredible faith journey where I felt like my call was back to Benton Harbor to say I'm sorry to people, to try to right the wrongs that I had done. So I was in that park that day with the intent of running into people who I had harmed, with wanting to tell them I'm sorry. So that was...
So a few years pass after this awkward meeting.
Yeah.
And you wind up, was it a community center?
Yeah, I was working for a nonprofit that was all about job placement in Benton Harbor.
And Jamel walks into the nonprofit. and you're looking for a mentor. They help you find a job, help you find... And tell them what happened.
Yes. My teacher came and said, hey, we finally got you a mentor. It was 3 weeks into the class, and she was like, we finally got your mentor. God has laid it on my heart for you two guys to be mentor, mentee. And he's done some things in the city of Benton Harbor, but you can change them at any given time you want. And I was like, all right, Miss P, who is it already? And she was like, Andrew Collins. And I was like, ain't no way.
Can you imagine? So his mentor is going to be the cop who put him in jail unfairly, with whom he had this encounter in the park. So how did you get past the point of, oh no, to they now call each other brothers? How? Because
it was too much going on. Too many things I was seeing them too much. Too many things were being lined up, and I know it wasn't my doing.
You think it was the Lord?
Definitely. So
why?
Man, because I allowed them back into my life, and I wanted something different. I wanted to be able to give something different to my son to look up to.
Yeah.
Were you able to forgive him?
Oh, yes.
Quickly?
It was a process. It wasn't just like today, tomorrow, I'm just done. It took years to get to this point.
Every few months I ask him if we're still okay.
How about you, Andrew? Have you forgiven yourself?
Yeah, that was a key thing. We've learned that as we go speak places, people will come to him afterwards and they'll say, hey, this person's done this thing to me. How do I forgive them? And then they'll come to me and they'll say, I've done some messed up stuff, but you. And
you make me feel better about myself.
Right. And what they're trying to ask is, how do I forgive myself? Because I can't walk through what God has for me if I'm going to keep myself in the prison of my past. So, and we also realize that God saved this story for a very unique time in our country. You see a black man who was innocent, completely innocent, framed by a white police officer.
Yep.
And so we see that we can step into some spaces now and
What's been the reaction from the African American community as you go out and you do your public speaking together?
It's mixed. I think for the most part, a lot of love for both of us, just saying we need this, we need to see more of this. There's always going to be people who don't want progress, and they want to say bad things about both of us. I should have got a longer prison sentence. He forgives too easily, and that's the problem with, and so we hear a lot of that, but for the most part, it's people just embracing it and wanting to see change.
Jamel, when you forgave him, when you finally got through that process, how did it change you on the inside?
I became me again. because I was so caught up in the bitterness and the angriness, you know, I wasn't myself, you know. That was taking control of my life. And so basically I just got my life back.
How's your relationship with your son now?
Oh man, it's great. It's great. It's A1. That's my guy. He's a aspiring football quarterback. He loves football, and man, that's what he want to do. He want to play football and just hang out.
Wow. Good for you. Thank you for being so honest about your story. Incredible.
Thanks for having us.
All the best to you.
Thanks for having us.
Unbelievable. Andrew and Jamel's book, Convicted, is well worth the read. It's out right now.